if you want to use more upstrokes, starting U-strings upstrokes, then you would effectively have to change the angle of your wrist. And this would be kind of a position like close to what George Benson and some bebop players do, where they're still floating, but their hand is more, the angle of their hand is a little bit more straight. And this allows you to easily do alternate picking. Let's say if I just do, and you may notice that I start to involve a bit of the thumb movement. Whereas if I use the pure technique, ideally it just comes from the weight of the wrist and the arm. And you even see some people, they're double jointed because they press kind of hard against the pick, which I don't necessarily recommend because you don't want tension, but some people do that. But if you use the pure technique, it's all activated from here. You do not have to involve this. But if you want to use alternate picking, then I'd highly recommend you do this. So look, now my angle is like this. So players that do play this way, Birelli sometimes does this, Noé Reinhardt, Adrien Moignard, players that have a bit of a hybrid technique. Hey Josh! So I live in a part of Montreal where all the gypsy jazz players are pretty much neighbors, and Josh just stumbled upon us. Josh! What's up, man? Okay, sure. So when you adopt this technique where the wrist is a little bit more straight, it's easier to do this. Yeah, because some people ask me about this. Can you use this? Yeah, you can. I always want to think in terms of for every action there's a reaction. So if you choose to do something, then you deal with the consequences, the pros and cons. The advantage of using the pure technique is it's easier. You use natural movement of the wrist and arm and everything, and it's easier to do what I showed you. But on the negative aspect of that pure technique is that you can't really do those upstrokes, certain intricate patterns. On the other hand, if you use more alternate picking, it's much harder, especially if your hand is floating, then it's much harder to play loud with this technique. But you can do more complicated picking patterns. I'm not so good at it. It's not a technique that I really use, but I should probably explore it. So yeah, and then there's everything and anything in between, because I've seen, going to all these gypsy camps, I see all these players doing just about everything imaginable. Some with a floating technique, some without. Thank you. Then some people ask, can I rest my hand against the top of the body? Personally, when I practice, I try not to do this, but it's just me. I try to maintain as pure a form as possible to really kind of exercise the wrist and everything. But when I play live and when I'm playing really intricate stuff, it does happen that I sometimes touch the top of the body for a little bit of an anchoring point to make it easier to pick. But the most important thing though is that you don't push against the top of the body. On certain instruments, I'm not sure about this one, but when you press against the top of the body, it dampens the resonance. Let me give it a try. Let's see what happens. Here, without. Yep. I don't know if you can hear a difference. I don't hear much of a big difference, but I definitely don't recommend pushing hard because that's also tension. If you just lightly touch, it's fine. So there's no problem. I've seen people do this too. As long as you feel roughly relaxed, it's okay. Another question people ask, how loud should you play? That really depends. I think it's more important to learn to project and then to play loud. And to me, there's a subtle difference between loud and projecting. Loud can sound really bad. So that's loud, but projecting. is a little bit more subtle. I mean, it's still playing loud, but not like exaggerated loud. And well, how should you play? That depends on how you approach this music. For me, personally, I like the acoustic element of this style, so I learned to project. For others, they like to use amplification, pickups and whatnot. And they also like to play very, very intricate lines that require a lot of dexterity, where it's very difficult to pluck harder. So then they have, right? So then they don't pick as loud. That the only disadvantage is then if you're in an acoustic jam, or if you're playing in, I don't know, a 400-seat theater, you probably won't project. You probably need some sort of microphone. Whereas when I perform in a 300 to 400 seat theater, I generally play acoustically, and people in the back can still hear me. So it's something you have to decide for yourself. Is that cool? It's something you have to decide for yourself, and it's also who you surround yourself with. If you're playing with players that are always playing loud, then you probably have no choice but to do the same. On the other hand, if you're playing with players that are a little bit more quiet, especially in the accompaniment, then you don't have to necessarily pick as loud. Or if let's say you're doing a concert in a living room, or 20 people, 30 people in attendance, then you also probably don't have to hit as hard. It all depends. So let's talk about picks. This is what I like to use. Dunlop 2mm Gator picks. I like this pick because I like the feeling against my hand, my fingers, and I like the material. Some people also use this. It's by Dunlop as well. It's the turtle picks. Yeah, Dunlop. This one's 1.5mm. I tried using these. A lot of people use this, but I found that when they're brand new, sometimes the edges are a bit rough and they get caught in the strings. So, and I find that the black ones don't have that problem. This is the 2mm one. There's also the 1.5mm, and I found the same issue as well. And I can see here the edge is a bit rough and it'll get caught in the strings, so I don't like it. That's just me though. And also, when you use 2mm or less, most players like to use the rounded edge because they like the definition that it gives, the round sound. But some players also use the pointer. Let me see if you can hear the difference. The thing about picks though is like all these different picks, if you do a blind test, I doubt anyone could tell a difference. But it's more of a psychological influence. There definitely is a difference in sound, but it's not like a big deal in my opinion. And my main reason for using these is because I lose picks all the time. I was in Samoa a few years ago, and this guy wanted to offer me a really expensive pick, and I felt so bad. I was like, please don't give this to me. I know I really appreciate it, but I lose picks very easily. I don't know why, but it just happens that way. He says, no, Dennis, please, I want to offer you this pick. All right, he gave me the pick. 3 days later, I couldn't find it anymore. I was sure I kept it in my wallet. So these are cheap. But in a blind test, you probably couldn't tell whether I'm using the rounded edge or the point edge. Here, let me use all the picks just to show you. Here's now let me do the pointed edge. Back to the rounded edge. Pointy edge. The difference is very subtle, right? Here, let me use the blue pick, the purple pick. It's a bit rounder. Pointy edge. Then you have these expensive picks. Maybe a little bit more volume. When the picks start getting a bit too thick, I wouldn't use the rounded edge because you lose quite a lot of definition. Use the pointy edge when you use the big ones. I got this one from Tommy Davey. What is this? Tommy Davey Django guitar pick. I like this pick a lot actually. So he gave me this expensive pick and I haven't lost it since. And here's a really crappy pick from what? Strings and Beyond. I don't like the tone. I was using the pointy edge. The rounded edge here. So for picks, man, just use whatever you want. People have compared picks to bows, violin bows, cello bows. It's not the same comparison at all, because the bow does something far more complicated than a pick. So use whatever pick you want, but I would say one thing though. I would try to bring my technique up to a point where I can use just about any pick. If you absolutely have to use one pick above all others, and you use the other picks and your techniques, you just can't execute your lines, that means your technique maybe isn't so strong. I would bring my general technique up so that any pick should work. And if I use a specific pick, it's just maybe allows me to do the complicated stuff. So to sum it up, if you can't even play the simple stuff with any pick, bring your technique up. If you're wondering what these big picks were, these are how Americans call wagon picks, but I think in Holland they pronounce it wegen, something like that, wegen. Klootzak.